All right, what's up, everybody? This is episode 3 of a 5-part portraiture series. In this episode, I'm going to be taking a drawing. It started well, and in episode 2, things went downhill a little bit. And I can tell you this, I did this drawing about a year ago. I just recently found the video and decided to provide a voiceover to it. I can tell you this right now, that I didn't like where the drawing was at the moment. Her eye looks like it's got too much eyeliner on it. I think some of the angles are off. I didn't draw the hair big enough. I think I did that on purpose though, so I can keep the edges of the hair loose when I push it out into the background a little bit more. But this is an important part of any drawing. You know, most of my drawings I hit a stage where I think something is not right with this. I'm not excited about this. Where did I lose my way? And there's a couple of things that you can do at this stage. I mean, one, you can sit down, let your eye dart back and forth between the subject and the drawing, and decide the path that you need to take in order to fix it. Or you can just rip the paper off and start over again, and there really is a time to do that. But in this drawing, I was able to push through and achieve a drawing that I was very proud of. One of the things that was helpful was getting out this smudge stick. If you're a charcoal artist and you've never used a smudge stick, they're amazing. They're like magic. Many of you might use your fingers to do this. I would discourage that because your fingers can leave oil behind on the paper, which can function as kind of a permanent fixative to the charcoal, making it very impossible to work back in with your, or very difficult to work back in with your eraser. Here you can see I'm using this smudge stick to get this nice, soft, wispy effect of the hair. This is why I drew the hair too small. I wanted to be able to find the edges of the hair, the meeting of the hair in the background, softly and energetically. And this is where I think the drawing began to get exciting for me. I had planned for this effect, and at this stage I'm probably starting to see that the effect is going to work. Look at the decisions I'm making about where to leave soft edges and where to leave hard edges. That's a very common question I get from students. And I would say, and maybe this is kind of a frustrating answer, but look at your subject and ask yourself, do you see a sharp edge or a soft edge? Do you see a thin line or a fuzzy line? Is it specific or is it vague? A lot of beginning artists want to render the vague specific because they're worried that it won't read well. I would encourage you all to stop trying to do that. If you see something and it's vague, then try to draw it that way. If you see something and it's specific, then draw it that way. You might be surprised at the end of the drawing. It might read a whole lot better than you think it will. And it's important to remember as well, it is easy to go from vague to specific. It is very difficult to go from specific back to vague. So just let yourself move from vague to specific slowly and gently. For me, it's never too late to recheck angles in a drawing. You know, if you want to hear all about finding the angles of this drawing. There it is. I knew I would erase that eye. I think I said that I would erase that eye in episode 2. But I can tell that I was unhappy with it. I got the angle all wrong. It may seem subtle, but I'm dropping that lid just a little bit lower. And that angle is much more severe this second time. Or it's angled far more steeply. Maybe that's a better way to put it. And this is something that every artist has to deal with in any kind of a drawing, any kind of portrait. Is you're gonna hit points where you're like, what happened? When did I lose control of this? I have to remind myself to stay calm, to step back, let my eye dart back and forth between the subject and the drawing, and decide what I need to do in order to fix it. You know, the value separation between the iris and the eyelashes and the brow ridge to the left of the eyelashes, it's all very gentle and very soft. And I drew this a year ago, and this is actually my first time watching through this since I did this. And I'm just hoping that I keep that really soft. I think I do, because I really like the way the drawing turned out. It's hanging in my gallery at the moment. If I were to work on this today, I think I would take that smudge stick and bring it across the entire face. You know, I do not like to work on a drawing this way, where you render something to completion before you do any rendering on the part of the drawing right next to it. I think that's a poor way to work, and I honestly think that's why I'm having so much trouble on this drawing at the moment. You know, how can you find the truth of a part of a drawing if you haven't explored the areas around it? You know, it's in that correct context that the answers reveal themselves. And so I think this is actually a pretty poor method. But luckily, I do eventually get to a point in the drawing where I like it. So I must have found my way eventually. There I go, softening the relationship of the iris to the eyelashes to the brow ridge. Now if I can just bring that smudge stick across the rest of the face. You know, it's kind of fun for me to look at my process a year ago and realize that I've learned so much since having made this. That's pretty encouraging. Sometimes we have to go back and, you know, this is one reason why I tell my students, don't throw away your work. I have one student who actually took a stack of her, well, what she would have considered failed watercolor paintings, and she took them outside and burned them. And I get that. I mean, you know, I can get so frustrated, but man, it's so valuable to be able to go back and look at what you made. Whether it's to realize, hey, that was actually better than I thought, or to just realize how far you've come as an artist. I mean, your failed drawings are still such an important part of your journey. You know, your failed drawings are the stepping stones that you have to traverse to get to your successful drawings. Just don't throw them away, keep them. And if you have storage issues, then take pictures of them. I asked this student of mine, I said, well, let me see pictures of those paintings that you burned. She didn't have any pictures of them. I guarantee you a lot of those paintings were better than she thought they were. A lot of students of mine say this painting is terrible or this drawing is terrible, and I say stick it in a closet for 2 weeks and then look at it and let me know if you still think it's terrible. More often than not, they come back and they say, no, it's actually pretty good. I think when we're so close to a drawing or a painting, we get overcritical. We don't actually see it for what it really is. And so that's the value. I mean, even if you're frustrated with a drawing, go outside for 5 minutes, let your dog run around, grab a glass of water, then come back in and just sit down and stare at it for a while. You'll have a totally fresh perspective. You know, even bringing the value across the bridge of the nose and into the other eye, I mean, even that little bit of value has started to place that left eye in better context. And you can tell that I think that because I'm adding more value to the hair, which means I'm feeling more confident. Adding more value to those outer lashes. And if it were me today, I would say stop right there and bring the value in around the chin, down the neck, on the shoulders. Yeah, that's starting to get better. The goal here should be to keep this as simple as possible for as long as possible. You know, if you can possibly communicate an area using one value, then use one value. If you must have more, see if you can do it in 2 values. You can always render it more complex. It's really hard to take something complex and render it more simply. And this right here kind of illustrates a very important principle. I mean, once you have your planning done correctly, or correctly enough, I mean, you'll never get perfect, then go ahead and put the right values in the right places. If you look at that hair and you say that's a value 8, then just go ahead and shade it in with a value 8. And sometimes that's when it all starts to come together, and it won't until you put the right value in the right place. I used to draw with so much fear that I had incorrect placement. And so I would shade from a value 1 gradually to the correct value. If it was a value 8, I would shade a value 1, then step back. If I liked it, I would go to a 2, step back. If I liked it, I'd go to a 3 and then a 4. I think that really held me back from learning how to shade for a long, long time. I would encourage you to just throw caution to the wind. And if you have placed it correctly in your initial structural planning, then just go ahead and put the right values in the right places. You're going to learn more by making 5 drawings that are imperfect than you will by making 1 drawing that you attempt to make perfect. And your 5 drawings will probably end up better anyway. There we go. That right there, taking that value all the way down that side of the face, that's what I should have done a long time ago. you know, find the big picture before you find the little pictures. And that's kind of difficult on this one because this drawing, it has such uniform lighting. I mean, the light is just bouncing off of all of those white walls, and there's probably reflectors in there as well that the photographer was using. And so the story of the light and shadow, it's actually a very difficult drawing to make because you don't have a light side versus a dark side, or versus a shadow side, I should say. When looking for good portrait references, I would really encourage you all, find portrait references with a strong light side and a strong shadow side. It's the patterning of light and shadow that enables the artist to capture the illusion of volume on a two-dimensional surface. So I'm definitely going to need to rework the bridge of that nose. I bet you I go back in with an eraser. There we go. And here, I think I've made a pretty big mistake at this part of the drawing, and I really hope I see myself go back in with an eraser here. Look at how softly the eyes are drawn in comparison to how sharply those nostrils are drawn. I mean, it makes the eyes secondary characters and the nostrils primary characters. And that's just weird. I don't want to do that. So I'm really hoping I go back in and soften those nostrils. Once again, I haven't watched this since I made this drawing a year ago. So I'm kind of surprised at the strategic errors I've been making along the way. Now this is a good decision right here. I'm wanting to capture the value on the top and the side of the nose. Interestingly enough, the brightest part of the nose is the underside of it. We've got light bouncing up from probably that white bed sheet, or more likely a reflector that the photographer's using. Okay, so that was a really strong move right there. Notice how soft the transition from the upper lip into the skin over the upper lip. Notice how soft that is. Many of us say this is a lip and this is a cheek, and so you make a nice, strong division. But don't render a strong division where you don't see one. Keep it gentle and soft if you see it gentle and soft on the subject. So that was a good move. And hopefully I'm about to soften these nostrils. It's finally improving a little bit here. Boy, I've really taken kind of a roundabout way. I want to see myself put some value in on those shoulders. Maybe I don't. Maybe I like that it moves from a value exploration into line work as we move away from the focal point of the drawing. I mean, that's an interesting compositional decision right there. I use it a lot, so I won't be surprised if I use it here. Now I just need to bring that value across that lower lip. If you let your eye drift out of focus, you'll notice that the value of the lower lip is pretty similar to the value around the lower lip. It is ever so subtly darker. But if you want the lips to look correct, you need the cheeks to look correct and the chin to look correct. And so developing the surrounding areas will help the lips too. Okay, I think I'm going to stop here at this point. This is the end of episode 3. There's going to be 2 more episodes where I take this drawing to completion. So episode 1 was all about finding the angles and the foundational planning. Episode 2 was about moving into the finer details and beginning to block in the value. And episode 3 was fighting with mistakes and trying to maintain the energy and the story of this pose while also finding correct line work like edges, rediscovering angles where I lose them. So I hope you all have enjoyed this. As always, like the video. Let me know in the comments what you think, what you'd like to see in later videos. And subscribe to my channel if you haven't. I'm going to keep this content rolling. Hope you all have learned something. And I'll catch you on episode 4. Okay, peace.